"We're inviting your son to the wedding, but your 8-year-old daughter's not," my sister said. I just replied, "Thanks for letting me know." That night, without thinking twice, I made one change. 3 weeks later, their plans began to fall apart. I should have known my sister would find a way to ruin it. After everything I'd done for her, everything I'd paid for, she still found a way to cross a line that made my hands shake. It was a Wednesday when she called. I was in the middle of dinner cleanup when her name lit up on my phone. I expected some last-minute question about the florist or seating chart, the usual chaos I'd been managing on her behalf. Instead, she dropped it like it was nothing. "We're inviting your son to the wedding, but your 8-year-old daughter's not." That was all. No explanation. No warning. That. I didn't scream. I didn't ask her if she'd lost her mind. I just said thanks for letting me know and hung up. Then I stood in my kitchen staring at the wall, trying not to let my daughter see my face. I had paid the first deposit on the venue. I negotiated the catering contract. I bought her dress, she still hadn't paid me back. The cake? I found the vendor. The invitations? I printed them on my own dime. My parents had put in maybe $200 tops. Her fiancé's parents made it clear they weren't paying beyond a set budget. So guess who picked up the slack? Me. The older sister. The one with the full-time job and 2 kids of her own. And now I was being told that one of my kids wasn't welcome. Not because of some logistical issue. Not because of space. But because my sister couldn't stand how much attention my daughter got. She wouldn't say that out loud, of course. But I knew. Her own daughter from her previous marriage was struggling. Barely interested in school, always glued to a screen, cold to everyone. Meanwhile, mine was winning local art contests and being asked to read poems at assemblies. It ate her alive. That night, I sat in bed with my laptop, opened the wedding spreadsheet and made one change. I withdrew my share of the venue payment. I didn't send a message. I didn't make an announcement. I just stopped. By Friday, I started getting emails from vendors. The venue asked if the final payment was coming. I told them to speak with the bride. The florist sent an invoice. I forwarded it straight to my sister. I wasn't rude. I just stopped pretending I owed her anything. She didn't text until Sunday night. "Did something happen with the venue deposit?" I answered, "Yes. I'm stepping away. Can't justify contributing to something that excludes my daughter." Her response? Silence. For 2 days. Then she showed up on my doorstep without warning, like we were still kids and she could just walk in and yell until she got her way. "You can't do this to me," she said. I almost laughed. "Do this to you?" I was done being the free wedding planner. I was done being the emergency wallet. I told her flat out, "You made your guest list. Now live with it." She left without another word. No apology. No reconsideration. But I could tell from her face, the panic was setting in. Her wedding was 3 weeks away. Her money had dried up. And she hadn't even begun to understand just how fast it could all fall apart. The next week dragged on like something out of a bad dream. I expected at least a few angry texts, some overdramatic voicemail from my sister, maybe a guilt trip from my mom. But what I got was silence. Not a single word. Which meant one thing: she was in damage control mode. By Thursday it started unraveling. First, I got a polite but nervous email from the venue coordinator, asking if the delay in payment meant the event date was changing. I didn't answer. I didn't owe them anything anymore. I'd removed myself from all the contracts, all the group chats, all the logistics. Let them talk to the bride. Later that day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. It was her fiancé, Darren. We'd never had a real conversation outside of holiday greetings. Now he was calling me personally. "Hey Scarlett, I know there's been stuff going on. Just checking in. Is everything okay?" He sounded genuinely confused. That threw me. I told him the basics. That I'd paid for nearly half the wedding up to this point. That I'd been handling the logistics. That my daughter, his future niece, had been cut from the guest list for no real reason. I didn't cry. I didn't rant. I just said it plainly. He didn't say much back. Just that he'd talk to my sister and get back to me. I didn't expect him to. And I didn't expect him to believe me either. He was about to marry her. He was already in too deep. Or so I thought. The next day it escalated. First I got a text from my mom. Not to check in on me or the kids, but to ask if I could please not ruin your sister's big day over some misunderstanding. Some misunderstanding. That's what she called it. I told her I wasn't ruining anything. I had removed myself. I wasn't interfering, I wasn't making demands. I had simply stopped paying for a wedding that excluded my child. Her granddaughter. A child who adored weddings, had been excited about the big day, and had even handmade a little gift for the bride weeks earlier. Mom didn't budge. She told me I was being emotional. That my sister was under stress. that I should be the bigger person. I hung up on her. I don't do that often. But I knew where this was going. It was always going to circle back to me being responsible for fixing what they broke. And then the dominoes started falling. The dressmaker paused all alterations due to an unpaid balance. The florist emailed the bridal party saying she was stepping away due to lack of clarity around payment. The caterer sent a cancellation warning. Vendors weren't getting paid. Deadlines were missed. And my sister still hadn't called me. On Sunday my dad called, which was rare. He doesn't usually involve himself in drama. But apparently my mom had been in his ear nonstop. We've decided to help cover some of the remaining costs, he said. Calm, measured. Like it was no big deal. Right. The same people who said they couldn't contribute $1 were suddenly opening their wallets. Not because they wanted to, because they had to. Because the wedding was slipping through their fingers and their younger daughter was about to be humiliated. I said that's good to hear. I meant it. But I also meant, I'm out. And I meant it even more when the formal invitations arrived later that week. One envelope for my son. Nothing for me. Nothing for my daughter. Not even a mention. My son came to me with the envelope in hand, confused. He didn't want to go. Said it didn't feel right. I told him he didn't have to. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at that invitation and thought, she really believes she's winning. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly predict, was that Darren had already started asking questions. He called me once. That was all it took. And soon he was going to find out exactly who he was marrying. The week leading up to the wedding was eerily quiet, like the silence that settles in right before a storm. No screaming matches, no guilt trips, no apology. Just a silence that felt heavier with each day. On the outside it looked like everything was coming together. My sister had gotten most of what she wanted. The venue was still hers. The flowers had been replaced with a cheaper option. My parents, begrudgingly, had chipped in enough to keep things moving. Her dress was altered, the catering was locked in, and the invitations had been sent. Selectively, of course. But underneath all of that, things were slipping. Vendors kept reaching out to me by mistake. Apparently, they still had me listed as the primary contact for a lot of the arrangements, because I had been the one organizing everything. When they didn't hear back from her, they started looking for answers. One email mentioned how they'd received a check that didn't clear. Another asked if the seating chart was final. A third apologized for the chaos but said they'd do their best with what they had. I forwarded everything to her and said nothing. Then out of nowhere Darren called me again. He didn't sound defensive this time. He sounded tired. I've been trying to sort out what's true, he said. I just need to know what actually happened. I kept my voice flat. I told him everything. I told him how I paid the deposits. That I covered the dress. That I helped coordinate everything while juggling work and raising 2 kids. That I stepped back only after being told my daughter wasn't welcome. I didn't insult my sister, I didn't take shots. I just laid it out piece by piece. There was a long silence. He asked how much I'd paid in total. I gave him the number. He was quiet again. Then he thanked me. That was it. But the tone in his voice? That was different. He sounded like a man who just realized he'd been standing on a trapdoor. 2 days later, my mother showed up at my door. No call. No warning. Just marched in like she used to when I was 19 and she thought I owed her something. She didn't ask how the kids were. Didn't ask if I was okay. She came to accuse. Why did you go behind your sister's back and talk to Darren? I told her the truth. He called me. I answered his questions. She looked at me like I'd betrayed the family. Said I was ruining things. That I was making my sister look bad right before the most important day of her life. That's when something in me finally snapped. You're all okay with how she treats me because you've trained me to keep my mouth shut. But I'm not doing that anymore. She didn't argue. Just glared. Then left without another word. After that, it was like someone lifted the lid off a boiling pot. I started hearing little things through the grapevine. One of the bridesmaids dropped out. A groomsman backed out last minute, citing family obligations. The flower vendor refused to deliver until full payment was received. The makeup artist doubled her rate after being asked to do 6 people instead of 4 without warning. And yet, on social media my sister kept posting like everything was perfect. Engagement photos, inspirational quotes, even a post tagging all her vendors, including me, though I hadn't been involved in weeks. Then came the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't invited, of course. But my cousin sent me a video. My sister was beaming, surrounded by people clinking glasses and posing for pictures. But Darren? He looked stiff. Barely smiling. At one point he pulled one of his groomsmen aside and they had a long, tense conversation off to the side. And then, the day before the wedding, I got a message. From Darren. He said I didn't know. I should have. But I didn't. Thank you for being honest. And for stepping up when no one else would. He said he needed time. That some things weren't sitting right with him anymore. That he hadn't known the full story. I didn't reply. I didn't want to interfere any more than I already had. But I could feel it. Everything she'd built on my back was starting to shake. And the person who was supposed to marry her was no longer looking at her the same way. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from nerves. Just this odd, unsettled feeling in my chest, like I was still holding my breath. The wedding was less than 24 hours away. And something was coming. I don't know what I expected when I opened my eyes that morning, but I definitely didn't expect the wedding to actually collapse. Part of me thought they'd fake their way through it. That Darren would show up, put on the tux, smile for the photos and deal with the regret later. But life as usual had other plans. At 9:17 a.m. I got a call from Aunt Cindy. She's not dramatic. If anything, she's usually too polite to even gossip. But this time she sounded like she was hiding in a coat closet. Did you hear? Darren's gone. Left the hotel last night. No one knows where he is. I sat on the edge of my bed and didn't say anything for a long time. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I did. By 10 a.m. I was getting updates from everywhere. My cousin texted me from the venue. Guests were arriving and people were whispering. The groom's parents looked uncomfortable, the bride was locked in a room, and apparently, my mom was walking around saying things like he must have had a breakdown. But it wasn't a breakdown. It was a decision. At 11:42 a.m., it was confirmed. The wedding was off. Darren's sister, a woman I'd never met, was the one who told everyone. She stood up in front of the guests and said Darren had left the state early that morning. There would be no ceremony. There would be no explanation today. Half the guests walked out. The other half stayed out of pity, maybe curiosity. And my sister? She came out wearing her dress anyway. Walked into the reception room with this blank look on her face and started slicing into the wedding cake with one of the bridesmaids. Like if she smiled long enough, she could pretend it never happened. Someone tried to make a toast. Another person started crying. A DJ who had only been hired for 4 hours played music no one danced to. It wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a very expensive delusion. I wasn't there, obviously, but the photos made their way to me by that evening. People love posting disasters if they look aesthetic enough. What really hit me was a message I got the next morning from Darren's sister. She'd only met me once years ago, but she said Darren wanted me to know something. The night before the wedding, he confronted my sister in their hotel room. He had spoken to vendors. He had looked at receipts. He had read old messages. Someone, probably one of the bridesmaids, had shown him a screenshot of a group chat where my sister joked that my daughter was too precious for her own good, and she couldn't risk her stealing the spotlight. He asked her directly if it was true, if she had deliberately left out my daughter, if she used me to bankroll the wedding, if she ever planned to pay me back. She didn't deny it. She told him I'd always been dramatic, that I made things harder than they needed to be, that I could afford it, that I owed her. And that's when he walked out. No speech. No explosion. Just packed a bag, got in a car and left. The next day when it all came crashing down, I thought that maybe, just maybe, some people would understand now. That the truth would finally come out. That someone would say you were right to step away. But that's not what happened. The first thing I heard from my parents was that I should have just let it go. That I had embarrassed the family. That I drove Darren away by involving myself. That even if I was hurt, I shouldn't have talked to the groom. I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain anything. What was the point? A week later, I went to drop my son off at my parents' house for a visit. My daughter wasn't invited. My mother forgot to mention that. At this point, I thought I'd seen it all. But then I got a message I didn't expect. From Marcus, Darren's best man. He said Darren told him everything. About the money. The way my sister treated me. The exclusion of my daughter. He said Darren was devastated he didn't realize it sooner. Marcus ended the message with something I didn't know I needed to hear. You didn't ruin anything. You showed him who she really was. It took guts. It was the only kind thing anyone had said to me through this entire mess. And it reminded me that sometimes telling the truth comes at a cost. Even if you're right. The wedding was over. Darren disappeared. Moved back near his sister, started over quietly. My sister pretended it was mutual. Said they grew apart and agreed to separate. But no one really believed it. What shocked me most, though, was what happened next. She didn't just move on. She turned her attention right back to me with a vengeance. The wedding had ended in disaster, but the real storm came after. I should have expected it. My sister had always been the type to rewrite history when things went wrong, and she wasn't about to stop now. Within days, I became the scapegoat. It started small. Relatives not responding to messages. 2 of my aunts pulled out of a family brunch I had organized. No explanation. Then my mom stopped calling. When I finally reached out, she said she was too tired to talk about it anymore, and that everyone just needs to move on. But no one moved on. They just moved away from me. People I'd known for years started treating me like I was radioactive. Like I'd ruined something sacred. And my sister, without ever needing to say a word directly to me, made sure everyone knew her version of the story. That I'd sabotaged her. That Darren got cold feet because of my bitterness. That I'd overwhelmed him with drama. That I poisoned the wedding from the inside out. She never mentioned the payments. Never mentioned the exclusions. Never mentioned the screenshot that Darren saw. Instead, she painted herself as the heartbroken bride, betrayed by her own sister, blindsided by a man she thought loved her. The woman abandoned at the altar because her sibling couldn't handle not being the center of attention. And people believed it. One of the cousins I'd babysat as a teenager posted a story captioned, "You never really know who's happy for you until it's too late." My name wasn't mentioned. Didn't have to be. What stunned me the most was how quickly my parents adopted the same narrative. My dad was silent, retreating into his usual neutrality. But my mom? She took my sister's pain and made it her crusade. She told me flat out on the phone one day, "You should have handled it differently. You made her feel abandoned." I said, "She made my daughter feel unwanted." Her reply, "Your daughter didn't need to be part of everything." That one sentence put the final crack in whatever was left of my relationship with her. But the fallout didn't stop there. My daughter stopped getting invited to birthday parties she used to go to every year. People we saw regularly in the community stopped making eye contact. At a school fundraiser, one of the other moms, a woman I used to exchange recipes with, turned away as I walked by. And my sister? She was still spinning it. Carefully. Quietly. She told people Darren had struggled emotionally. That he had a pattern of shutting down. She told one of her friends that something had been off with him for weeks, and that she felt sorry for Scarlett having to raise her kids alone. She was building a whole new version of the story. One where I was unstable and she was the victim who had tried to hold the family together. But something else happened that she didn't expect. Darren didn't stay quiet. He didn't post anything publicly, but people started hearing things. Apparently, he told a few people, privately, respectfully, that he'd left because he found out what had been going on. That he couldn't stand behind a woman who was capable of treating her own family that way. That the only person who told him the truth was the person everyone blamed. Word traveled. Not loudly, but it reached the right ears. And then I got a message from Marcus, Darren's best man. He was in town for a few days and he wanted to meet. I wasn't sure what he could possibly say that would help, but I agreed. We met at a little cafe near the park. It was cold out. Quiet. He didn't waste time. He pulled out his phone and showed me something. Screenshots. The same group chat Darren had seen. My sister mocking my daughter. Calling her Scarlett's little golden child. Saying she couldn't wait for her to stay home so the spotlight wouldn't get stolen by a third grader. He called her a brat. Said she didn't fit the aesthetic of her wedding. Said I needed to learn boundaries. I sat there staring at the screen. Not even angry anymore, just numb. Marcus slid the phone toward me and said, "Darren wanted you to have this. In case you ever need to defend yourself." I told him I'd make sure you saw it. He also told me something else. The morning of the wedding, Darren had written a letter. Not to my sister. To my daughter. He had planned to give it to her after the ceremony, saying how sorry he was that she hadn't been invited, and that he hoped one day she'd forgive the adults who should have known better. But he never gave it to her. He left it behind. Marcus had it. He gave me the envelope. I haven't opened it yet. I went home that day and didn't say much. I watched my daughter play with our dog in the backyard. She looked peaceful. Untouched by all the noise swirling around her. But she wasn't. She'd heard whispers. She'd felt the cold shoulders. Later that night she asked me quietly, "Is it because I'm different from the other kids?" I told her no. It's because you shine. And some people can't handle that. 2 weeks later, just as things were finally starting to settle, it happened. My sister showed up at my door. She had a gift bag in her hand. Wrapped perfectly. Pink tissue paper. A bow. Like this was just another family visit. She said, "I brought something for your daughter." I opened the door wide enough for her to step in. Not because I was ready, but because I needed to hear what she had to say. She stood there like she belonged, like she hadn't spent the last month dismantling my life from a distance. My sister didn't look like the woman from the wedding photos. No makeup. Hair tied back. Puffy eyes that weren't from allergies. She held out the gift bag like it was some kind of peace offering and said, "I brought something for your daughter. Can I come in?" I let her in. Not because I forgave her, but because I was done running from people who pretended they hadn't hurt me. She sat at the kitchen table like she used to when we were teenagers, except now everything was different. My daughter peeked out from the hallway and saw her, froze for a second, then walked away without a word. My sister noticed. She said, "I just wanted to apologize. To you." And to her. I didn't say anything. Just waited. She kept talking. She said she'd been stupid. That she'd let the pressure of the wedding and old resentments cloud her judgment. That she never meant to exclude my daughter. That she thought it wouldn't matter. That she assumed I'd get over it because I always did. Then she said something honest. She admitted she'd been jealous. Of me. Of how people responded to my daughter. Of how close I was to my kids. Of how Darren respected me in ways he didn't respect her. She said she thought if she could just have one day, her day without feeling overshadowed, she'd feel better. Instead she lost everything. She said Darren wasn't coming back. That he was polite but firm. He didn't want to rebuild trust with someone who used their own niece as collateral. Then she cried. But here's the thing about apologies. They don't undo anything. They don't fix lost birthdays or ruined friendships. They don't make your daughter forget that someone decided she wasn't worth inviting. They don't rebuild trust, they just explain why it was broken. When she finished crying, I finally asked, why now? She looked at me quiet for a long time, then said, because Marcus told me everything you did. Everything you paid for. Everything you gave up. I didn't know how much I owed you. Not just money, time, energy, loyalty. You always showed up for me. I never thought it was real until it was gone. I should have felt vindicated. But I didn't. I just felt tired. I thanked her for the apology. I told her I appreciated her saying it to my daughter when she was ready. She nodded. Said she understood. Before she left, she placed the gift on the table. I didn't open it in front of her. I just watched her walk out the door. Later, when my daughter finally asked what it was, I let her open it. It was a set of watercolor pencils. The expensive kind. The kind only people who paid attention would know she wanted. She looked at me and said, is it okay if I forgive her? I told her yes. Of course it was. That forgiveness was her choice, not mine. Then she asked, are you going to forgive her too? I said, I already have. But that's not the same as letting someone back in. The next time we saw my sister was at another family event. She smiled. She kept her distance. My daughter said hi. My son did too. I nodded politely. And that was it. No more shared planning. No more covering costs. No more explaining myself. She apologized. And I accepted it. But the version of me who would have done anything to protect her day? She's gone. And what's left now is something I never had before. Boundaries. Real ones. And the space to protect my daughter the way no one ever protected me.